It's another episode of Butt Crack Cycles. Today, we're talking about what you should be looking for if you are currently Sportster shopping. Before we jump into this episode, I just want to say thanks to everybody who watches this channel. And if you're new here, if you're finding my channel, my name's Paul, and I just do videos about older Harleys. Sometimes we work on bikes, sometimes we just go ride bikes, sometimes we do what we're doing today, which is sitting down and talking about something in old Harley land. And that something is Sportsters, and my pick for what I kind of think is like the Sportster you should be looking for if you're currently shopping for one. And Sportsters to me are really important, not just because I own them and I like them, but the Sportster is the longest running motorcycle in Harley history. It ran from 57 until 2021. The new crap that they have out now with the liquid cool engines, I don't consider a Sportster. I would not own one. I guess if you have one, good for you. I hope you enjoy riding it. But to me, 2021, when they killed the air-cooled Evo engine, is when the Sportster platform really died. And the Sportster, the little XL, is probably responsible for getting more people into the Harley brand and more butts on seats and more new riders onto Harleys or even just onto motorcycles, period, than any other bike that Harley has produced. Before I unveil my pick for what you should buy if you are currently in the market for a Harley Davidson Sportster, let's do a little bit of history. Everybody likes history, at least I do, and you know, I'm a certified yapper, so I love to talk. Let's talk. The Sportster came out in 1957, and if you know anything about Harleys, every Harley model has a prefix, and the Sportster's prefix was XL. Some people say that the XL stood for or stands for extra lightweight, experimental lightweight, experimental light, extra light. I've heard all of these as explanations for what the XL is. Essentially, though, it was a smaller bike than the Big Twin, and Harley had been making a small bike prior to 57, and it was the K model. And the K model itself was actually pretty cool. It had a lot of features that the Big Twins didn't have. The K model was the first Harley to have a hand clutch and a foot shifter, which was backwards from how the Big Twins were at that point in time. And if you've ever been on any sort of, reasonably modern motorcycle, that's the way things still are today in 2025. Ironically, and this is kind of funny to me, a lot of people disparage Sportsters for their poor ride quality, and there is some truth to that for sure. But the irony here is that the K model was the first bike to have hydraulic suspension front and rear. So we obviously had, hydraulic forks in the front, but the back of the bike had a swing arm with shocks on it. So again, some features that the Big Twins didn't have that are pretty modern and pretty much every modern bike has today. But enough about the K model. Let's talk about Sporties. When the Sportster came out in 57, it had 54, 55 cubic inch iron head engine. And the iron head ran all the way till 85 in the Sportsters. It was the only engine available in a Sportster from 57 to 85. Obviously, there were many changes to it over the years, but the basic architecture of the Sportster engine of the iron head remained the same for that entire time period. And there were other changes. We went from a 900cc engine to a 1000cc engine over the course of the iron head production run, and we saw the change in side of shift on the bike, right hand side shift to left hand side shift, etc. So yeah, there were some changes along the years, but the basic iron head architecture lasted from 57 to 85. And then of course in 86 the Evo engine comes out, and it continues that same straight pushrod 4-cam engine that is wonderful. I've talked about this in some other videos about why that pushrod angle means that these engines are very long lasting and have very good valve train geometry at high RPM. So you can watch that video if you want to. I think it's called like the greatest engine Harley ever made or the best engine Harley made. Something to that effect. Just know if you're buying a Sportster, you are buying what I think is the best Harley engine they've ever engineered. And into the 80s and 90s is where you start seeing some like really significant changes, in my opinion. Yes, like say for instance, 1980, all the Sportsters go to electric start, so they don't have a kickstart anymore. Yeah, that's a pretty big departure from years past. But like a 79 Sportster versus like an 85 Sportster, there really aren't too many huge differences there. That core bike is basically still the same. But the difference between, say, like an 86 Evo Sportster compared to, I don't know, a 2006 Evo Sportster, or even going from an 86 to a 96, just 10 years, those are some pretty big significant changes. So I want to talk about that here. The biggest single change, I think, to have happened to the Sportster platform occurs in the 91 model year, and that is the introduction of the 5-speed. And you probably can see where I'm going with this. This is pretty important to me, and pretty important for a lot of people buying a motorcycle. Yeah, the old 4-speed bikes are great fun, and I really like riding a 4-speed. Both of my personal bikes are 4-speeds, my Shovelhead and my Ironhead. I don't own a 5-speed bike. There's some 5-speed bikes on this property, but those are bikes that I bought to fix and then flip and resell. But the 5-speed is really, really, really nice, especially if you're trying to lay down some miles or ride at higher speeds like on the interstate. And if you're riding in a group with guys with big twins, having that 5th gear to grab onto and let that bike stretch its legs a little bit more, it's pretty nice. The next big change here comes in 2004, and that's when we see the rubber mount engine and transmission. Previous to this, engines and transmissions, which of course in a Sportster is a unitized construction, meaning the engine and transmission share one case. It's not like a big twin where they're two separate things. Anyways, up until 04, they were solid mounted. Well, in 04, we go to a rubber mount engine. And Harley's reason for this was to try and cut down on vibrations and just make the bike a little bit more pleasant to ride. And, you know, noise and vibration and harshness are all things that, yeah, on a 30 or 40 mile little quick scoot around, you might not notice, but if you're laying down 150 or 200 miles at a time, then you might actually care about that. And the final and last, what I think, big change to come to the Sportsters comes in 07, and that's where we see EFI come out. So you have fuel injection, and the old venerable carburetor, the old CV, finally dies and gets replaced with a computer and some fuel injectors and a bunch of sensors and wires. So now that we've touched on a little bit of Sportster history and some brief, 30,000 foot overview of changes throughout model years, what model years do I think are the best to buy? 96 to 03. Why? In that 96 to 03 period, you get what I kind of think is the perfect storm of Sportster goodness to make a bike that is affordable to buy, easy to work on, affordable to work on and maintain, and nice to ride, good and fun to ride. And it sort of has that core value of what makes a Sportster so good. Let me talk about that. The 04 and later bikes, the rubber mounted bikes, yeah, they do vibrate less and they do ride better. But I think in gaining some of that comfort, you lose some of that just like raw, sporty, fun, flickable, connected to the road feeling that the earlier bikes have. The rubber mounted bikes are heavier too. It's around 80 to 85 pounds difference between, say, like an 04 versus an 03. They had to make some changes to the frame, etc. The bottom line is that it's a heavier bike, and heavier is generally not good when we're looking for performance, especially going around curves. And yes, I know, I said performance going around curves and Harley in the same sentence. I'm sure someone's going to get on here and say, well, if you wanted to go around curves, just buy a Jap bike. But you can still have a whole lot of fun hustling a Harley around curves, at least I do. Some other things I don't like about those later rubber mounted bikes is sort of ease of service. Say you need to pull a transmission out of your bike. Well, on a rigid mounted Sporty, that's pretty simple job. Like, it does not take long. There's one sitting on my workbench right now, as a matter of fact, and I had that thing out very quickly. On a rubber mounted bike, different story. You no longer can access the transmission, just sort of the way the bike sits. You end up having to split the case, so it turns what should be a simple and quick job into a pretty major ordeal. I also don't like, kind of as the years progress in the rubber mounted bikes, how things become more plasticky and there's more covers, and like the battery cover I don't like, and it ends up meaning that these bikes to me just kind of look more and more metric and less American. They kind of start like, I don't know, like you know it's a Harley, but you're also kind of looking at the thing thinking, gee, it's like a Harley and a Honda Rebel had a kid. Nothing against a Honda Rebel. I owned a Honda Rebel 500 for a while and I loved the bike, but it was a Honda Rebel. And if I own a Harley, I want a Harley to be a Harley, if that makes any sense at all. And so what I'm trying to get out is that I think the 96 to 03s are the Goldilocks bikes. They're new enough that you get a lot of great features. You get the 5-speed transmission, and it's a good 5-speed too, I might add. You don't have the extra added weight and bloat of the rubber-mounted engines. You don't have the complexity of the fuel injection systems. You're not relying on a computer and sensors and all that crap to keep the bike going. It's pretty simple, straightforward DC wiring circuits with some fuses and circuit breakers and relays, an electronic ignition module, 2 spark plugs and some spark plug wires. That's really it, and a carburetor. They're easy to work on as a result, and maintenance on them is pretty straightforward and simple. You don't have to have a scanner or anything like that to diagnose what's wrong with your bike, just a little bit of good old-fashioned mechanical know-how. And the last sort of thing as to why I really like that generation of Sportsters is because there's a very large aftermarket for those bikes. If you're looking for aftermarket parts and custom, parts to make the bike more your own, you'll find that 96 to 03 generation of Sportsters tends to have a very robust selection of good quality aftermarket parts and people making sort of custom one-off or semi-custom like Prism Supply. These are like small batch parts. They're bolt-on chopper sort of parts, but they're cool and they're nice and they're well made, and a lot of those parts are made for that 96 to 03 generation of Sporty. Finally, if you are just buying like regular stock parts to keep your bike going, the parts are cheap and very easy to find. A lot of times you can still get them at the dealership, and there is some good backwards compatibility as far back as to like around 89 on some stuff. Again, this just depends on what you're working, but it's not like you're stuck with only a few year models worth of parts that interchange. You've got at least 10 to maybe I would even say 15 years worth of year models that if you're looking for good used parts, or just going into a parts house, you're more likely to find the part that you need on the shelf versus perhaps maybe some of the older or some of the newer stuff where parts availability might be a little bit more of a task. So then what would I say is like my follow-up, like my second pick if I can't buy a 96 to 03 Sportster? Well, I would still say Evo, and I would just go a little bit older, like the 86 to 95. Personally, I actually really like those early Evo Sporties, especially like 87, 88, 89 in there. I can't quite say why. They still sort of have an Ironhead-esque feel to them, to me, with that Evo reliability. And then, like, what would be my third pick, I guess, if we're making a little short list of Sporties to look for if you're out bike shopping right now? And that would be late model Ironhead 79 to 85. I'm personally kind of biased towards those just because I own one, but I do think those are actually really good bikes. Harley had really refined the Ironhead to its what I consider its best by then. There's some people who don't like them and say that those bikes are a little too bloated, that they're all electric start, for the most part all electric start, and kind of a bigger, more dressed bike, whereas you get back into some of the older bikes, kickstart only bikes and stuff like a XLCH or whatever, which I think like the late 60s XLCHs to me are really, really cool. And there's some people, though, who said that the later Ironheads just lose that really stripped down, bare bones, just bare-knuckled brawler feel of those early bikes. And while those people do make a good point, and I would tend to agree with them to some extent, those earlier Ironheads, especially the kick-only bikes, are starting to actually come up in price here lately. And so I tend to try and gear this channel towards, like, just like the everyday person, every man, every woman. Someone who's just like a blue-collar dirtbag like me who doesn't have a whole lot of money but loves these older Harleys and wants to be out there with the wind in their face, catching bugs in their teeth. And so, from that perspective, the later Ironheads I think are a better buy, because those are bikes you can often get for a few $1,000s, and they're still pretty good. And final thing here, if I was going to buy a Sportster right now, what would I buy? Well, it wouldn't actually be anything on this list. I would go buy a Lunchbox kick-only bike, just because, like I said, I've always thought that they were really neat. Do I think that's the best Sportster to buy? No, absolutely not. If you're on the hunt for a sporty right now, if the weather's warming up and you're looking out the window thinking, man, I've always wanted a bike, or maybe you're sitting there with the Japanese bike thinking, I've always wanted a Harley, I don't want to spend a ton of money, and I don't always want to be working on the piece of junk, what should I buy? 96 to 03 Sportster. 883 or 1200cc, dealer's choice. Whatever you can get the better deal on that's in better shape. That's really the important thing here. Yes, the 1200 does make more power than the 883, and yes, it is going to pull harder, especially on the top end or in a straight line. But the 883 really isn't too bad. I've had a few of them come through here over the years, and I had one that I loved. I had a 01 883. It was red. I'll put a picture of it up here on the screen somewhere. I actually made the most money on any bike that I've ever bought, fixed, and then flipped on that particular motorcycle. I've had some of my most popular YouTube episodes have been about that bike, and I really enjoyed riding that motorcycle. I had no problem at all keeping up with my buddies on their newer twin cams. And I just really enjoyed riding that bike. It handled well, it got great fuel mileage, it was a wonderful little parts runner. I had a tall sissy bar on it with a big bag, so you could stuff parts in it pretty good, or go even like make little short quick grocery trips on it. I never did end up taking that bike on any big like camping trip like I had planned, but I really enjoyed owning that bike, and it was just a very practical, simple, easy to get along with and easy to live with motorcycle that some days I kind of wish I still had. Maybe I'll go buy another one. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Thanks for sticking with me. I still really want to do some kind of like live stream to celebrate 10,000 subscribers. I said that on my last episode last week or whenever the heck I published it. But yeah, I just hadn't got around to it. I've been busy. Anyways, y'all keep an eye out for that. Thanks for supporting this channel. Web store is buttcrackcycles.com. You can buy t-shirts and junk and stuff over there. Yeah, that's it. It's a beautiful day. I got some work to do to the Ironhead. I'll see y'all later. Bye.